Thank you, Kari. Wonderful way to bring us to that point and share how we are pushing the envelope and learning these issues and that we're still in process. One of the things we do want to share are the fact that we are going to be, through Lighthouse, developing tools, toolkits, and sharing the lessons learned in very usable fashion. That is one of our goals, to take what we've learned both with residents, with the technology, with the broadband infrastructure, and even how to find funding and be able to bring some of those lessons to other folks. So please plan to stay tuned on that. But again, it's with Kari has already shared with you the key issue of, we see this as a huge white space that more organizations, more individuals can help tackle some of these problems, which we think are the really cutting edge issues to make this work in affordable housing and for other vulnerable populations. Kari also nicely called out our colleagues in Decimal Health and CDW, who have been fantastic at both helping us find these solutions, pushing the envelope and how to bring it to really into existence in the most affordable, efficient way possible. Again, we cannot thank them enough, and we will share lessons from them. In terms of going forward, though, I would like to just close us out with several more ideas. Next slide. And that is, we feel that there are a number of key issues going forward. Our goal is not to just do our pilots in California, but to really take these lessons further, but to work with other organizations who are doing this. And we'd like to be, first and foremost, humble enough to say that there are wonderful organizations doing great work in this space, and we'd like to call that out because this is going to take a very large collective effort. But ultimately, we're looking at broadband underlying this. This is a key issue, and we feel even more committed to this as we're looking at this from both a program and a policy and a funding basis. That we know that the current administration in Washington has put a focus on this. We know that in California, our administration has also assembled an entire broadband initiative. This is, if anything has come out of COVID and the pandemic, we understand that having this infrastructure going forward is critical. Broadband is central to this happening, and that will help us reach individuals and help individuals be empowered. So we, again, are looking at the idea that broadband should be considered a utility. It should be available to everyone, everywhere. So we hope to support that, and we hope you can join us in that very important issue. We'd just like to acknowledge some of the other wonderful organizations around the country that are tackling this in different ways, particularly in affordable housing organizations, but organizations like Humana, AARP, and OATS have come together. The older adult technology services now to grow a much larger platform for the training side. AARP Foundation has convened a working group to bring organizations together who all have similar interests. And Leading Age, our wonderful association, national association, and we have a fantastic group here in California, are leading the charge to bring the organizations together on how to take these lessons learned. So this is being done by others, and we would encourage you to look for organizations in your own region, your own state, who are also working on this. Next slide, please. But underlying this still is this issue of, how is it going to be paid for? We are trying to tackle that. Several of you in the Q&A have already asked, how do you pay for it up front with the technology? How do you sustain the technology costs, particularly internet service? What happens to the costs of the devices, which they may be front-loaded, but many residents may not have ability to pay for these devices. So how do we get the resources to help people get started? And even more so, how do we pay for ongoing support and maintaining the system, which is often forgotten, and it can become a critical issue for the sustainability of a program. We're reviewing a number of different approaches. We're assembling best practices, and we're looking for, again, different collaborators in the funding side. We do see the list in front of you that there are different elements that can, and different organizations that can pay for different parts. We do envision that ultimately, particularly for broadband, there is the public sector, particularly federal government, state governments, will have to come to the table. we hope that we see very new, encouraging combinations of lower cost solutions that can be done with private sector working in this area. And we're exploring, in addition to philanthropies, foundations that, for example, the wonderful anonymous foundation that has supported this initial work, that we're looking for other organizations and regions that can help jumpstart programs in individual buildings or for larger systems. But we also know that there are going to be some creative approaches. We're exploring issues such as not only the broadband funding, which we'll talk about coming out of the federal government and state government, but different organizations like community development block grants, looking at new programs around different types of financing systems that have never been tapped into for this area. So we would appreciate your staying tuned. We will try to assemble, as part of our effort, a number of these different sources so that people, organizations, whether it's CEOs, boards, staff, can turn to these different types of sources to tackle this issue. Next slide. But also underlying this is the key role of where public policy will be in this area. The two biggest areas that we're seeing are around broadband, but also telehealth. While we are not, we're dealing with the digital divide and initially talking about getting technology to individuals, training them in their ability to use it, making sure that we get people comfortable, particularly older adults who may not be digital natives in this area. We still see that telehealth and other types of very practical programs for communication, for engagement, for information will be the drivers for helping move this forward, but that it needs the broadband and telehealth solutions. So whether it's existing programs that, such as what the Federal Communications Commission has offered, there are multiple funding streams to bring broadband not only to rural areas, but now to many other programs, particularly through COVID. As we start working with housing and urban development in Washington and the regions about how to potentially look at ways that different resources could be freed up within those programs, but particularly through the new infrastructure funds that will be coming down the pike. This is a very critical time to take advantage of not only what will be available, but potentially being able to influence these types of programs to make sure that organizations, affordable housing, other programs that are where vulnerable populations are supported can take full advantage of these resources. Next slide. So in conclusion, we think that there are a number of key issues that we've been identifying we're going to continue to tackle, and we would look forward to working with those of you on this call and others to really take this on. And clearly, the first one is affordability, not only for organizations in terms of how do you actually bring the broadband in, get the technology supported over time, but the issues around affordability to residents, to individuals who, and how to make it very attractive to them. So we see that as a fundamental issue and need to look at this from multiple perspectives. As Kari shared with you, and you heard from both Davis and True, we understand language now has become a key issue. This is occurring across the country, that particularly in affordable housing, language can be one of the biggest barriers. And how do we work with technology companies and look at new technology to deal with multilingual issues? We see it as both a key need. We see some devices that are working in that area, but it's a wonderful area for both research and innovation. We also see the ability of innovative training programs. As you heard from Davis sharing how we're looking at peer support, how do you make sure that training can be engaging and done by people who are working right in the space and with their colleagues, so that when a program is set up, it doesn't require necessarily technical assistance from outside, or that it can be really supported internally. And again, we need to look at long-term funding in this area, not just the initial putting this in place. And several of the questions address this. We do think that there'll be several elements related to this. Are there issues related to the way internet service providers can create very powerful internet connectivity, but at an affordable price? but are there other payers who could be involved in this? Is this something that should become not only as a utility for broadband, but part of the services? Could it be within the healthcare system or social services system as a key way to keep people independent, viable, and healthy, not just in COVID, but beyond? And finally, technology changes. The one thing that we always say in Lighthouse, the technology is just a tool, and technology, even while we've been at it, has changed several times over, and there will be continuously changing. So we're looking at processes and ways to approach this to move forward on an ongoing basis that people can really learn how to change and address changes in technology. And of course, we are very excited to work with both public and private sector as to how can we improve those technologies so the user experience, the interconnectivity, the interface for residents and staff becomes easier and easier, and ultimately becomes secondary to making sure people can really stay independent. So with that, if we could go to the next slide, we'd like to just open this to more questions and answers. We're going to take this collectively with Kari, Davis, True, and David responding to some of your questions. We have another 10 or so minutes. We'll answer several of the key areas. If we don't get to them, again, we will plan to work with you offline. We are capturing all the questions, and we will be able to try to answer as many as we can. So if Davis, True, and Kari could come back. True's, we'll see if her technology is working again. We're hoping it will. And we will start responding to a few of the questions we've had. So first, let me offer my colleagues a chance to share anything additional that they would like to add or respond to any of the online questions. Davis, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. And front porch has been trying to kind of understand like the best way to address this vexing problem. I mean, we have done a number of different kinds of technology initiatives and projects, from hearing devices to telehealth and telemedicine, to other kinds of engagement technologies in affordable housing, because we understand like how important the need is there. But the thing that just keeps on coming back to us over and over and over again is how we can really sustain these kinds of programs without in-room resident connectivity. And so we're really kind of coming to a head here with Lighthouse, and Lighthouse really is, it really serves as what we feel is an important demonstration project as to like what's possible and what we can accomplish and how we can scale this. And this is one of the most important reasons why I'm personally really excited about what we're trying to accomplish here. This is really difficult for a reason. There are lots of challenges, lots of hurdles, and I think that many of us on this call like have at least experienced a little bit of something that we had talked about this morning. And so, we're very hopeful, and right now, the conversation around broadband and affordable housing has reached this crescendo where we have like really this amazing opportunity, probably once in a lifetime opportunity, to leverage the interest and the excitement and the push in order for us to not just bring in Wi-Fi and broadband access to these underserved communities, but to sustain and to truly engage with our communities and address a whole slew of different challenges that our residents are facing.
Thank you, Davis. True, let's see if your mic is working again. And we'd love it if you could also, we saw some questions, particularly about, from your perspective, being on the ground. I think this is still front and center. It's one thing for us to be back from an organizational perspective, but from your perspective, if your mic is working, can you share with us the challenges you still think the greatest ones you had, and what could you have done differently, or what do you think will be some of the next steps moving forward?
Yeah, David, I think that True's having some
Yep.
technical issues, and if
So,
you could
so again, we
throw to
apologize,
question and answer
and
chat
we
box.
will try to respond and see if True can send us those. Always a challenge from the technology side. So maybe we turn then to Kari when we talk about the some of the issues, because you have been in a position at Front Porch, as is Eschaton, in terms of funding these programs. I would like to share in asking you this question first, in terms of looking at some of the funding streams that you found successful and issues, what you think will be most important, that what we two other partners in the Lighthouse program are Build Healthy Places Network, which is helping us identify many different types of organizations and other funding streams, community development financing institutes, et cetera, that we hope to look at as options. And also the Center for Connected Health Policy, the federal HRSA telehealth program, which is helping us look at some of the policy issues. But Kari, would you address what you see as some of the greatest likelihood in terms of funding streams and sources that organizations may want to start considering as they look to take on programs like Lighthouse?
Okay, sure. Give me a really tough one there. Where was my softball, David? No, here's what I would say. If I can speak from experience, I think if you are lucky enough to be working in an affordable housing community, you start local, right? That's what we did. We started looking in our operating budgets and capital budgets for what we could get started with. And I think I don't want anyone to think that any start is too small. Actually, any start is just enough. And what we found over time is getting that going any way that you can is it creates this momentum. Staff, I mean, you heard the impact these interventions have, and it creates more energy and opens up more doors. From there, we've definitely had a lot of luck with philanthropy, both our own foundations and outside foundations, as well as we're increasingly now going in the advocacy route, looking to make sure that HUD and others that fund affordable housing think about putting in requirements and making dollars available to support infrastructure, to support those ongoing costs. And then we're looking across the country at others doing the same thing and learning from them. And we're really excited because we are seeing organizations have luck talking with HUD about really making sure that we fund the infrastructure. And then ultimately, if we all join together into this advocacy that David and Davis are speaking about, we can speak with one voice. I think one of the most important parts about the advocacy that everyone needs to be aware of is that most of the policy is thinking about underserved individuals as individuals. So it's very, very important that we as affordable housing providers get to the table and speak with one voice about how they can work with us to serve those individuals, because right now that's a missing piece. And while there's going to be dollars available, it's going to be a little bit challenging to harness them as affordable housing providers. So I know that was from cradle to grave, David. I don't know if that entirely encompassed it, but the last thing I would throw in there is that I'm super excited about the directions that David and the Lighthouse Project are going in with Build Healthy Places and looking at non-traditional funders that have maybe a social impact focus that could also help provide resources to get this important work done.
Thank you, Kari. So I do have some input from True to share with you. And one other response that I think is a critical question. There are many that are still, we won't be able to answer. But before I turn it back for final comments from our colleagues, I'd like to share that True's recommendations are that it's really important for those individuals who are on the front line doing this to encourage their residents, the people who are using the technology, to really learn with additional resources, whether it's learning manuals, support lines, videos, whatever is pulled together. And Lighthouse is assembling a number of those. But because staff are not always there, this is one where we're trying to empower individuals, let individuals really learn and become experts in their own and use digital technology to their own advantage. But again, encouraging people to use all the resources available to them. And True's, really, it's probably one of the best points we could share today. This is not always an easy process. One has to be very patient. One has to understand that, particularly with folks who are not digital natives, that this can take time. And I think it's very important to find individuals in organizations who appreciate that. Just like we need the champions like the Karis and Davises at the executive level to make these programs work, we need the people at the front line who are really passionate and patient to be able to work with individuals. This is not a slam dunk in any stretch of the way. So the one other point that I think was raised up that's very important for us to address in the Q&A is around protection of individual residents, privacy and security, and that we do want to reinforce that that's fundamental. That is a lens through which we look at all these programs. We're always first and foremost wanting to make sure residents are protected, staff and organizations, and that as we looked at some of the technologies and the use of the technologies, that's critical. And whether there are issues around financial exploitation or their misinformation or individuals getting poor information through technology, this is always of highest concern and should be for anybody who's working in this space. So we're down to the last few minutes. What I'd like to do, and I apologize that we can't get True to give a comment, but I would like to offer Davis and Kari a final closing takeaway from your perspective. We've given you a number. Again, the slides will be available, video, but I'd love to have them give 1 point each, what they would like to give a charge to you, our listeners today. So Kari, could we start with you?
Sorry, David, True just put her kind of closing comment in the chat. I don't know if we want to give voice to that, but she said, as a social service coordinator, if I could have done one thing differently, I would have loved to host a technology support class for the residents. I did mention how time consuming it was to provide that extra support, but I think it's important. I would love to have one day out of the week to just provide extra support specifically for residents by hosting office hours and providing training classes. I think for me, if I have a message or a final thought, it's get started. Get started any way you can, and know that there's a community of people out here that are trying to, I call it obliterate the digital divide. I don't like the concept of bridging it. I want to get rid of it altogether. What we have found is that there's wonderful people across the nation that are thinking deeply about this, trying things, working on solutions, and that the more we all come together and collaborate, the more impact we're going to have, and the more we're going to be able to share our story. So get started, and please, let's get connected.
Thank you, Kari. And then we'll turn to Davis. I'd love to send us out, please.
Yeah, again, as I referred to before, like this is really a passion project for us. And we've just seen this challenge over and over again. We're really in this exciting moment that unfortunately took a pandemic for us to realize like how important and critical access to information technology is, particularly for those who are most at risk. And our role as providers of these communities of affordable housing is really an important one. And I think that as much as there are tons of quote unquote band-aid issues out there that have their intention in a really good place, but we as affordable housing providers really need to kind of look at how we can play a proactive role in supporting the digital technology and health and well-being needs of our residents. And this is not a simple endeavor. As we've kind of learned today, it takes a village in order for us to really kind of pull together and understand what the needs are and how to address those needs. And there are just so many nuances, I think, that we touched on today. But the important thing that I would hope that we can kind of take away from this is that we really, as affordable housing providers have a responsibility, and that is to do what we can and to come together, as Kari and David had mentioned, to really impact the lives of people who otherwise wouldn't have access and would be further disconnected from all the opportunities that are afforded to the general population. So this is a huge effort, and we really welcome others to join us in this.
Thank you, Davis. That's a wonderful way to wrap us up. If you could go to the last slide, just for people's reference, I'd just like to share again that we have first want to thank our collaborators who've done so well and really made this happen. Eschaton, Front Porch, and the many other organizations we mentioned who made this happen. And we couldn't have done this and can't be doing this without them. And of course, the wonderful funding and our funder that has allowed us to tackle this area in all of the different ways that we're looking at. Please note we have not only our website where we will post the slides, the recording, but we will also be putting forward the lessons learned in the toolkit that will be coming from this. We are still in process and more will come. Feel free to subscribe to get more information on the program, and we will be providing more webinars in the not too distant future. Please share the information with other colleagues who may be interested. We love to hear from people and would love to be able to work with others. And finally, we again want to appreciate your feedback so we can improve how we get information to you. If you would please answer a short survey that will be coming to you probably tomorrow. So with that, I want to thank once again Davis Park, True Vong, Kari Olson, the people who make this really happen. And again, all of you for joining us today. And we wish you a very good day and hope to keep you posted on the progress of Lighthouse. Thank you very much.